here we are again. So we're going to finish off the section on economic growth by looking at output gaps. So by the end, you should be able to do the following three things. Distinguish between actual growth rates and long-term growth rates. Look at what a positive and negative output gap is, and appreciate these are difficult to measure and illustrate using AD/AS analysis. So just a bit of a recap, because I think this is a really important way of having to think about what an output gap is, depending upon what we already know. Have a look at this diagram and jot down as much as you can remember based upon our work with the business cycle. So pause the video and jot down as many key terms that you can recall. Okay, hopefully you managed that. Number of different keywords you could have come across. So in terms of defining what an output gap is, the output gap is an economic measure of the difference between the actual output of an economy and its potential output. Okay, potential output is the maximum amount of goods and services an economy can produce when it's at its most efficient. Okay, i.e. when it's at full capacity, and that definition comes from the IMF. So what might be really helpful for you to think when you're looking at this topic is what we're really concerned about is the issue of an economy's capacity. Are we under capacity, or are we operating at above full capacity? So there are two types of output gaps, a positive and a negative. And you're required to be able to illustrate both of these using ADS analysis. I'm going to take you through one, and part of your own study work is going to be to look at the other one in your own time. So positive output gap is what we associate with higher rates of resource utilisation. Okay, you might have heard when you've watched a news report or listened to any speech, particularly by the Governor of the Bank of England. He often used to refer to the risk of an economy overheating. Okay, and that's what you would associate a positive output gap with. So the economy is booming, all factors of production are fully and efficiently employed, and it's something that we often will see in times of a boom. So, for example, you might have a factory like Nissan that employs workers on overtime shifts when demand for cars is peaking. On the other hand, a negative output gap is what we would usually associate the most with a recession. Okay, we've got a high degree of spare capacity in the economy. We're producing below our productive potential. At the same time, if we're producing below our productive potential, that indicates to us that our resources aren't fully and efficiently employed. Okay, so it's likely that we'll have a level of unemployment, or quite a high level of unemployment, or rising levels of unemployment. Okay. Now, with these two concepts, what's central to your understanding is with a positive output gap, we are thinking that the economy is growing above the trend rate of growth. Okay, and with a negative output gap, the economy is growing below its trend rate of growth. So another little activity if you have to go out here. Based upon the work we've done so far, pause the video and you should be able to draw a diagram to illustrate an output gap. If you think about what we did the week before we broke up, try and use an ADS diagram. If you struggle to use an ADS diagram, have a go at just using a PPF. So you might have drawn something like this. So we've got general price level, real GDP, and you can see YFE indicates the economy at its full employment level of output. Our economy is settled at PY. Okay, the distance between Y and YFE indicates a negative output gap, so we are producing below the economy's productive potential. Some statistics here from Statista, estimates, forecasts of the UK output gap. Obviously, at this moment in time, what we've seen over the past few weeks, I think this probably makes all of this redundant, but you can see that statisticians and economists have the job of trying to estimate what the level of the output gap is. Okay, so this figure for 2020, minus 0.2%, that's minus 0.2% below the trend rate of growth. Similarly, if we go back to a report produced by the Institute of Fiscal Studies in 2015, we can see varying different estimates of the output gap that just shows how difficult it is to quantify, okay, for the economists and the statisticians that do it. So it can be difficult to put a pinpoint number on it. This one shows the percentage of potential GDP. Okay, so what the economy could produce if all factors of production were fully and efficiently employed. So notice the difference between capital economics' estimate of the output gap and the OBR's estimate of the output gap. We've got a difference there. So that can be something you can think about when evaluating. You might be asked to look at the different factors that affect the size of the output gap. And some of the factors that you might come across as you're reading your textbook or your course companion are the following. So if a firm's reporting hiring difficulties, so let's say it's got a number of job vacancies and those have been advertised for a number of weeks, possibly months, and they can't fill those vacancies. Think what does that suggest to us? Well, it suggests that everyone who wants a job has a job, so those vacancies aren't being filled, so therefore the economy might be operating at a positive output gap. On the contrary, a firm might be reporting a bit of slack, right? Underutilised capacity. So a car manufacturer might have to halt a production line if they've got more than one. That indicates that demand's depressed, and therefore it has to slow production because it's not fully utilising all of the resources it has available to it. Okay. Productivity. We've discussed the central importance of productivity, a measure of efficiency, output per worker over a given period of time. Low productivity might be a signal of a negative output gap, and vice versa. High unemployment might indicate a lack of demand for labour and therefore a negative output gap. This labour could potentially be utilised, but it isn't. Okay, so that shows that people want a job, but the demand for their services isn't required. The economy is producing below its potential output. So where does this leave you? This is what I'd like you to have a go at. A little bit of reading at the bottom. I'll post the link on Google Classroom, but I'd like this for next week, and I'll set the exact date on Google. Analyse why the existence of spare capacity in an economy is likely to help keep inflation low. Now, when you are tackling this, it's the chain of reason, and it's absolutely key. So you need to identify your reason. So what could be the factor that is contributing to spare capacity? Okay, and it needs to be multi-stage, and your answer needs to end essentially with that this is going to keep inflation low. I would highly recommend you use an ADAS analysis in this, okay, and your chain of reasoning should link to your diagram, right, indicating potentially the level of the output gap, but also stick to the question. We must be always coming back to why is inflation being kept low. So thank you very much for listening. I'll look forward to receiving the answers on Google Classroom or in my email inbox in due course.